I'm negative. I just thought we're gonna start.
Good evening and welcome to the Town Board of the Town of Austine's special meeting and work session for Monday, December 5th, 2022. Please rise and join me for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for.
Councilmember Minichio,
Here.
Councilmember Meyer,
Present.
Councilmember Fields Wheel,
Here,
Supervisor Lindenberg. Okay, so,
start with a few announcements and then we'll get into our one agenda item for our special meeting. Neighbors Link will be holding a community meeting this Friday, December 9th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at their Austining location at 2325 Spring Street. This meeting will cover resources in the community and what you need to know. Dinner and childcare will be included. You can learn more or register by calling Stephanie Paredes at 914-615-1745. I wish I could say it in Spanish. I wish you'd be able to. There are also many opportunities, if you can, to give back during this holiday season to those in need for the holidays. And I talked about some of these, I'll talk about a few of them again, and then many of them are available on our website. Bow Prime is collecting new and gently used kids' hats, gloves, mittens, and coats until December 15th, with drop-off Austining School District offices at 400 Executive Boulevard, Microscope Music School, Austining Public Library, and the Austining Police Department. We are also collecting donations here at 16 Grove Avenue of unwrapped toys as part of Toys for Tots. And Austining New Club will be holding their annual toy drive at locations around town where they are collecting. We have shared these locations in my supervisor's update, and we will continue to do so. So please take a look at that. And that's kind of it for my announcements for right now. So unless anybody has anything to add, I know that there's a whole lot of local shopping. I encourage everybody to continue to shop local to the best of your ability, except for when your niece requests Taylor Swift blanket and you have to check it. Okay. Anybody have any announcements? Announcements. We had great tree lighting, lots of fun stuff happened last weekend. Though I think, actually, when is the menorah lighting this weekend? I think December.
no, I think it's the 20th. When I was looking at it or
no.
something.
No, I don't think so. It's the 10th also. So there's for full fire, having a big fire on the 10th. And then 14th, nope. 20th. All right.
Yeah.
Already gets it. Okay, it is in fact second night of
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. At Market Square, I guess. I guess, okay. Fantastic. Okay, so with that, we're going to move into our one agenda item for our special meeting.
Okay, so I'm just sharing our screen because we have a printed copy, but it's just one resolution. Personnel resignation, not approval of minutes. Resolved that the town board of the town of Austining accepts with regret the resignation for purposes of retirement of Jeremiah Sullivan from the position of paralegal effective December 1st, 2022.
Motion.
So moved. Regret.
Second.
So Jerry has been working for the town of Austin for 10 years now. First starting in a part-time role, 2012. We thank him for all his good work and his lovely demeanor over the many years on behalf of the town. And we wish Jerry all the best in his retirement.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? With regret. Sorry to see you go, Jerry. Thank you again. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn into work session? So
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so we have a few budget changes that we discussed. I'm going to turn it over to Victoria Caparelli to review the changes that have been made to the final budget that will go before the board for adoption next week.
Okay, so most of these changes we did discuss at length in the board's work sessions reviewing the budget, but just kind of conglomerating them all so we can make sure to review them before the full budget is before the board for approval. So I will read the reasons, because I know it's somewhat cut off there on the screen. So the first one, in the town clerk line, we reduced the budget for contractual services. This is because our usual annual maintenance is going to be necessary next year, because we're moving forward with the balloon upgrade of Laserfish. So that's all through the same system. So we were able to remove that annual maintenance because our costs elsewhere, which we had already budgeted for, is more significant, taking care of that this year. In the senior program, the two staff members that did have town issued cell phones have decided they do not want them. They would prefer to use their personal phones for communication at work. So we've removed that from the budget. We had a line in the zoning budget that we had not spent anything out of for several years. So we have wiped that out. In the highway department, we did receive a request from the highway superintendent, actually after the budget work sessions, looking to consider adding additional part-time help to his department, because the office staff in the highway department also does work for the cemetery and parks departments as well. And that work has continued to grow and grow as she's been working and being able to take on more tasks, but sometimes that means you need a little extra help. So the highway superintendent requested that we add some funding in there for part-time help, and then also reduce the budget for the guardrail replacement project, because basically $13,000 of the project was we were able to encumber in 2022. So we were able to bring that part of the budget down and increase the other part for part-time help. We did also discuss reducing the revenue for the safety inspection fees, as we have some new staff coming into the building department, and some slowdown of some, we have a lot of projects that are now sort of winding down to the end of their project phase. So not bringing in as many building permit fees on that. So we decided to reduce the revenue slightly from $110,000 to $100,000. All of these changes have been offset by other edits in the budget and our contingency lines and elsewhere. So we are not changing the tax rates at all. We're just sort of making these little slightly small housekeeping changes throughout the budget to make sure that we have everything budgeted accurately. So unless there's any questions, everything else will remain the same from the recommended to be adopted budget.
Any questions?
Sounds good.
Questions? Fantastic. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to you. Thank you to Dale. Brennan, sorry. Darn, sorry, Dale. Yes, thank you for that. Is Dale with us? No, Dale, she's not with us. Okay. Okay. So anyway, very grateful. With that, we're going to go to the next subject, which is a discussion of the DEC, or Department of Environment, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's East of Hudson Unit Management Plan. And many of you may be familiar with the Croton Gorge Unique Area. This special bit of forested state property is managed by the New York State DEC, but has impacted the surrounding communities now, including Portland, Croton, Newcastle, and Ossining for many years. Most recently, it has been shut down in an effort to make the access route to it safer and to protect it from erosion. It was discovered that part of the route that people often take down to the area was actually on private property. This kind of came about when they were taking a look to see if they could make some improvements to it. So the state, as part of this East Hudson Unit Management Plan, has proposed two designs to get down to the unique area, which would start a little north of where it had been accessed. And these designs are detailed in the East of Hudson Management Plan that was recently issued, which we have linked to on our website. The DEC is accepting comments through December 22nd. We wanted to discuss this with the board since this issue impacts the town of Ossining, specifically the areas around where people tend to find parking, which is near the Old Croton Aqueduct, because that is one of the ways that people walk there. And that's kind of how Ossining essentially ties into it. So we have our good friend Diane Alden and neighbor Daria Gregg with us this evening. Diane is also, I don't exactly know if you're the chair of Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct.
I'm on the board.
She's on the board of the Old Croton Aqueduct and has been involved in the issue of access to the unique area and all of the concomitant impacts that it has had over the years, for many, many years. Diane has been involved with this for many, many years. I'm guessing Daria has too, but I know Daria from other things, and she's here again as a neighbor. And we thought that it would be good for us to talk a little bit about the designs as well as what you might, if the board would like to send comments. And Diane, I am going to invite you up to talk and maybe just give a few key bullet points. Diane shared with the board a brief recap of how we got to where we are today. I think that's good.
Yep.
Yeah, how we got to where we are today. Gary, you can go up to if you'd like.
I'm just
You're
supporting.
good.
I'm
Okay,
just supporting.
you're just support. Okay. And maybe just, a few key bullet points from the document that you shared with the board, and then if board has questions and or suggestions or has any comments that we'd like to discuss amongst ourselves, and Diane maybe can share. I will tell you that one of the suggestions that Diane made is that the multiple municipalities who have been involved in this, Portland and Austin in particular, because Newcastle hasn't really been that involved, could write a joint letter with comments to the DEC. And if we can pull together a meeting between now and when those comments are due, that would be a goal, I think. So that's something that we're shooting for. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Diane to share a few maybe comments about what you maybe shared in your update, again, in your review of how we got to where we are and why we're looking at this management plan and these designs, and if you have any comments about the two designs.
Well,
And welcome and thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your advocacy for many years.
Oh, well, since 2012, actually.
And yes, and I will add that in addition to me being on the board of the Old Crow Aqueduct and being very involved in helping keep it clean and maintained and all of that, that you're a neighbor, that you live on Quaker Bridge Road.
I am, other than my next door neighbor who lives right near the social trail and the entrance and the parking area, I'm the most impacted because I'm next to him. So this is my backyard, which is one of the reasons why I'm extremely motivated to be involved and try to manage the situation and pull together the neighbors and the municipalities and do advocacies and fundraising and standing on my head and doing everything that I could figure out to do to make this area manageable. In the beginning, it was not. So maybe it's not the wisest thing for me to say, but I'll say it anyway. The DEC has been a follower in terms of making improvements. They have not been a leader. Dana knows and was involved in advocacy, trying to get them to change the regulations, because when the DEC purchased the property in the 70s, they were trying to protect it from development. They did put in a little parking area that turned out wasn't on their property, but they didn't realize it. And they had no idea that it was going to become popular. I don't think anybody did. I used to go down there swimming with my husband, and there was nobody down there. But eventually they put in no regulations. The only thing that wasn't allowed was littering, but they didn't do any management or monitoring of it. And Dana, along with a number of other people, as the area became popular and it became overused, trashed, and it was loud music, fires being made, drinking, all of which were legal, other than the trash. So we did advocacy with the DEC to get them to change the regulations, because the standard regulations for DEC unique areas, which is a special designation, were anything goes. So they ran up against a stone wall with the DEC saying, change City Hall. And so I did a little back research and found out that the standard regulations were as described, but special regulations were in place at other unique areas. So we did a lot of advocacy. I won't go into the details for the interest of time, but we got after the DEC, and we used some of our contacts in New York State Parks Department to do some advocacy with us, the commissioner of parks. Rose Harvey helped to do some advocacy, and we got the DEC to change the regulations, but it was, almost kicking and screaming. We got the Ossining Library for the public hearing to get the regulations changed, so now there's no alcohol, no drinking, no fires, no camping. Camping was permitted. Sunrise to sunset. It's consistent with other local park regulations. Swimming is permitted. So that was the first, but they didn't have any, the agreement that they basically made was they didn't want to change the regulations because they didn't want to have to do the enforcement. It's a little parcel far away from all their other areas. So they,
Are you pressing that little red button? Because I'm hearing you in and coming in and out. That's
Okay.
okay, so yeah.
thank you, Dana. So the regulations got changed, but they didn't provide any enforcement. But the deal that they made with the municipalities for changing the regulations was that the municipalities would take responsibility for enforcement. And the letter that was written to the commissioner by Linda Puglisi and the municipalities requested authorization to do enforcement. So we sort of fudged it a little bit, but the understanding was that there would be responsibility for enforcement. So the DEC is doing it. And then Dana worked very hard to try to get some funding for stewardship program, and the DEC was not forthcoming with that. So then we had to do a lot of local fundraising, and we got a lot of the communities in Ossining and Croton and the town of Cortland and a lot of private people and the neighbors, and we did fundraising. And when I announced there were going to be trail stewards and I would be doing fundraising in a meeting, people looked at me and said, "What are you going to do? Have a big sale?" But we did it. And the DEC was then sort of obligated to pay for half because with the evidence of such strong community support. But that's they've been followers. And then they went to the trail down to the riverside was becoming increasingly eroded and dangerous, and the trail stewardship program and I advocated for them to fix the trail, and they didn't want to do it. They said we'd be liable if somebody gets hurt, and we fixed the trail. And I said, well, don't you think you're just as liable for inaction? And that's when they did the survey, and some of their staff already knew it was on private property, but that's when it became obvious. And so that's when they had to close the social trail. Then they wanted to leave the rest of the area open, but have the social trail closed. And if anybody read my report, I went down to the embankment. I went down following one of the other social trails and found that it was completely dangerous to do that. And I because it was just too dangerous. The trail stewards were supposed to say you're not allowed to go down the social trail. We don't have any other safe way to suggest you can go down, but you can go down. That made no sense. So they got pressured to close the area for this last season. And the problem with having closed it this last season was that although the trail stewards and the county police that were managing, talking to the people who were arriving, they did a very good job, and most people did not go down. So there was a very small traffic, but the traffic that was down there was bad. They played loud music, they made fires, they left some bad trash. You could see that they were drinking. Very dangerous to have people in an unmanaged area drinking with the possibility of swimming. So the DEC proposed two paths. One fortunately, the management plan is being written right now. So if it weren't being written, we would have no chance to have the trail fixed, but it just happened. Timing is good. Timing is everything. So The one trail they're proposing is right by the parking area. It would be a very steep stairway down to the riverside. It would be very expensive. It would be very steep. It would be stone stairs. And there's always a chance that people would then wander off onto the private property, which the old trail, which is right close by. So they're not really advocating for that option. The second option is a little bit farther north. It would be off the Aqueduct Trail. They haven't planned it out exactly, but it would be what's called a switchback trail. So although they would be traversing a steep area, they would try to make it passable. One of the criticisms that I have of the management plan is they don't provide guidelines about how the trail would be constructed. But I am familiar with the trail builder that's done work for them in other areas, and he does build beautiful, accessible trails. So I have some confidence that it would work out okay, that I'm going to tell them they should put in the plan some guidelines for how the trail should be. So that's the one that looks most feasible. It's $100,000 to build is their estimate. Doesn't seem unreasonable. We have no idea what the impact of that trail would be on the number of visitors. It would be a little farther down from where the parking area is. One of the conundrums of this unique area that's so overwhelmed is that there's really no parking. There's 4 parking spots. So people park in local establishments, take an Uber, they park at Garland Park. They have friends drop them off. So there's no real, it says by the time they get there, some of the people are already a little frustrated. This is a beautiful area. They love it. Some people are just about in tears how much they love it. It's this wild place where you can go swimming, but there's no easy place for them to find parking. The town of Portland has done a wonderful job of putting guide rails around the edges of the little parking area, because that used to be crazy. They used to park up on the embankments. They put up lots of no parking signs along the road because it's a very narrow, winding road and it's dangerous to have people parking along it. So that's been fixed. The town of Portland's really done a good job of managing the parking, fixing up the little parking lot, because it used to be just boulders and people would move them. Now they put a post in the fence, so it's very manageable in that way. But it's a strange place because there's no place to park. It gets overused. We don't know whether, if we make this trail that's easier to traverse but longer and farther down the trail, we have no idea how people will respond. In 2021, when the area was open and we had trail stewards there, they did not find that it was unmanageable in terms of the volume that it was following the year after which it was closed during COVID. So to predict what's going to happen if they build the trail, we don't.
That was the first year that the stewards
That
were
was
on,
the second
right, the
year.
first year that the stewards were on was during COVID.
That's
And the
correct.
trail was closed
Right.
because
Right.
we didn't know, nobody knew. It was just recommended. I think all the communities said if we're gonna have this crazy year of everybody going to an outdoor space and being on top of each other.
Oh, no, that was
COVID,
just
it was not a good idea.
contraindicated. So, so I have a lot of issues with the management plan, the way it's written. But a lot of them are small issues. The big issue is they have not even said we need to have a plan for.
So, okay, so I'm just gonna kick in here now.
That's the end of what I have to say.
Okay, great. So, so thank you very much. And hopefully that'll help. I know that some of you know about this for other reasons. We've definitely been talking about this for a long time. Certainly it's been something that we've paid a lot of attention to because it has impacts on the neighbors, on the water view, people at the water view. And again, Burlap Park, as you mentioned, and other people in Crotonville, I think have felt the burden of people parking in all sorts of crazy ways to try to access the trail via the aqueduct. So we've been involved in it, our Austin Police Department has been involved also, along with Croton Police, and making sure that we do our best to have safety access for first responders, I guess. If anything does happen, there have been a number of accidents down there. Unfortunately, there are not lifeguards down there. Again, it's just open space that's available to the public. And many people come up by word of mouth through social media. They hear about it from the city for a day in the country, I guess, we'd say, on the water, especially when it's hot in the summer. So this has, been a great concern for us. And, again, we've been working with the task force for many years together jointly, as far back, certainly as Sue Donnelly, when Sue was town supervisor, and I'm guessing even before that, when these more and more people started getting wind of it. So my personal feeling is that the DEC needs to have regulations in place for managing the number of people who can access the unique area. And they have in fact done this at other areas that are like this, at other forested properties that are DEC properties. Diane has done some investigation into how this has happened. They started a couple years ago at Peekamoose Blue Hole. Is that what's called? Peekamoose Blue Hole in Catskills. Where they also get a large number of people, but they actually have some parking there. They have parking for, I guess, about 15 cars, and then they have campsites that are nearby, like a 10 to 12 minute walk. And they have been permitting cars which can have up to 6 people per car, which leads me to believe that they can have as many as 420 people based on that they're willing to give out, like 70 permits or something like that.
That's right.
So they have a permitting system. This was not the case 2 years ago, even when we started talking to them about, they had something in place and it was unmanageable. They didn't want to do anything like that. With this, there is no parking area around here. My belief is that they can still figure out a way to get people permits that they can either print out or have on their phone, and they can figure out a way to regulate the number of people go there. Again, you still have to have some enforcement. If we did have stewards, then and continue to have stewards there, and that program has been very successful, then it seems like there's a potential for being able to manage the number of people that go there. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest issue, is why are we building a trail down to a place that we haven't been able to manage consistently with any plan in place for managing. And as a result of that, it's created problems for the neighbors, it's created problems for litter, it's created safety problems. And I know that one of the ideas that had come up in one of the stakeholder meetings that we had was to be able to get like an ATV down there or something like that for emergency response or for enforcement or whatever needs to be done. So the idea that you have a trail that's wide enough to accommodate an ATV, switchbacks or whatever, I think makes a lot of sense. I hear Diane saying there's an opportunity because its management plan comes up. I don't know how frequently. So I get it, but I don't think that they can put in just a design for a trail with a number attached to it without having a management plan in place. That's, again, having been at many stakeholder meetings for many years. That's my feeling. I would love to hear from the rest of you, and if you have questions for or Diane, who's here for support, but is also a neighbor.
I'm actually not a huge fan of leaving it open. I think it's dangerous. I understand that it's very popular with people. When I was a kid, we used to like to try to go down there, and we got kicked out every time. I don't remember which police department, but the police would come and kick us out. And anytime you try to go down there, or
Maybe that one was private. Oh no, was it the 70s?
no, I was 80s. It was in the 80s when they
Were
kicked us out
Were you going by foot or by boat?
by foot. I've approached it by boat. I was not kicked out by boat, but I didn't stay long. I kind of went up and said, hey, that's pretty, and turn around and went back. So I think until it's safe for a first responder to get down there to help somebody, or until it's manageable, it should stay closed. Who's gonna pay for the trail? Is the question I have.
The DC would pay for it.
They would pay for it, okay.
Yeah.
I would also insist there's a porta potty that they manage there, because it's ridiculous, there's no facilities. And people are, taking it upon themselves to, be like a bear and go in the woods, whatever. But that is leading to higher E. coli levels in the Croton River, which people also, which people are swimming in, so this is not okay. And I mean, I have concerns, and I think there's a lot more talking and regulations and planning that has to be done before that area.
Let's do it anyway, so.
Yeah, I know they may decide to do it anyway. The trail stewards, I think, made a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, a real big difference.
I think you should, as a town, voice all that. to
Yeah,
them.
right,
Definitely.
that's-
Those are special concerns that are very valid, really.
I did speak up in the last meeting with the same comments.
Yeah. But
The last meeting that I attended, I'm not sure there were
But,
more after that, but.
in response to this management plan, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think the management is a big plug. It needs to be done. And also, are they identifying the trails, like the location? They have markers in this plan yet? How the
They have
trail,
an approximate location. In the plan, there is a map, but it's not very detailed. They don't have a survey with a detailed map of where the trail would be yet. But they've shown me where they think they would put it.
well, that's one thing I would like to see, is that to identify certain parts of the trail. So if somebody does get hurt, if they're using the trail, would identify where they're, what area they're in.
Oh, they will, they will. If they build a trail, it will be very clear.
It'll be very clear, okay, and have the room for the ATV, for the first responders to
Yeah, I don't
get
know.
any hikers that go
I
there.
mean, if you're doing switchbacks, that's gonna be difficult to do, especially the type of trail that they're gonna most likely put in there. Because then you're gonna need to fortify and have the width of a switchback, and then also be able to handle the weight of an ATV.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I think, we can mention that, but I think it might be better to have like a general recommendation of emergency to be able to ask that. Because my guess is it probably wouldn't come from the trail, but some other way.
A vote. Is there other
Right.
option?
But that-
And that's
If
only.
somebody
not
gets hurt
deep
on the
enough for
trail,
You can only get there by high tide.
Yeah, and it's not deep enough for an actual vote, any of the first responder votes, it's.
Well, only Croton's boat can only get up there, when it's high tide.
Right. But the thing is that, I don't know. They do both like ski now. I mean, if it's not an ATV, like, I can't imagine what other people.
Well, that's the thing. I think when you're dealing with switchbacks, they're.
I think there'd have to be 2 men onto the
Yeah,
stretcher.
they
with
could
the stretcher.
carry people out of the woods.
A bunch of ropes and technical
Right.
rescue type stuff.
Yeah,
you
right.
know, and
The
stove
fire
status
department,
kits and all
like, EMTs go together, my son carries people, at some of the other forts over there.
Yeah.
They've had trainings there.
Yeah.
I've seen them. But having it not, having it officially open, but without an accessible trail, I think is dangerous. I think it was dangerous this last year when they officially closed it, but they had no method for anybody to get down there to do education, to do stewarding, to do enforcement.
So
That's,
how did the people who were down there get down?
oh,
Down the-
They just walked whatever
paths
through the
or
woods.
whatever,
yeah, they bushwhacked.
People are gonna.
People are gonna,
Right, so I think, and I think
And that's the problem.
that's the problem, right? And I think that is Diane's point, which is.
They're gonna go there.
They're gonna go there anyway, how can we make it safe? And then my point is, if we're gonna go there anyway, and make it safe, we better figure out how to manage it better, because that hasn't really. And the statement of her.
What they did in 2021 is they had the stewards providing weekly reports about the volume. And they were going to do something. If the volume became, according to the stewards, unmanageable. That never happened in 2021. But I don't know what that something was going to be. So I think it needs to be.
Right, and that was the other thing that you mentioned to me earlier today about Pecos, is that they have a forest ranger dedicated to that in the high season, whether it's just on weekends or something like that. The DC has not been willing to do that. They said, their forest rangers have to be, go from here, there, and everywhere in the region and, pop in, and that's why they've never had a dedicated staff person.
I don't think we can expect that they will, but the town of Portland is working to change their system. So far, they've had county police officers, and I have to give them a lot of credit. They've had county police officers stationed there on weekends by the parking area. And they've been mainly managing the parking, but they're there as a presence. And they could be called upon if needed, and some of them, especially during 2021, when there was a fairly passable trail. They did, some of them would go down to the riverside and assist with enforcement. But they're thinking of changing the plan because most of them sit in their cars with the motors running, on the edge of the parking area. And they're thinking of changing that system. It's not signed, sealed, and delivered, but they would like to have park rangers, which are part of the county police system, accountable to the county police with a line of communication to the county police, but they would be like park rangers with, and they could collaborate with the trail stewards. So we might, if that happens, and they can recruit decent people, and they can find them and they can train them, that might be an improvement over what we've had in the past. We might have some additional enforcement resources that would be less expensive than what they're putting in now.
Thank you.
Sure. So my one comment is that I definitely think there's a need to regulate it. And I think however we do that should be in conjunction with our neighboring municipalities, particularly where it lays. I think it's a much powerful message if we have a joint letter or joint comments, however we do it. If we do it.
Yeah, I put in a very strong request to Dr. Becker and Jim Creighton, the deputy supervisor, to pull together a task force. And they said that they would. I hope that they do. They did have one a couple of months ago, and it was very well attended, and it was a very good discussion. So I'm hoping that they will do it because everybody together, they may not come up with a unified set of comments, but as much as we can, at least lay out the issues that the DEC has to address, because the management plan is really putting their heads in the sand and saying, not even outlining the issues that need to be addressed. My big push is that they have to commit to participating in a very active way with an ongoing task force to which they will be accountable to address the issues as they arise. So they can't just have a management plan and come up with, pie in the sky. They're going to have to stay actively involved.
One other question, I'm sorry. Just because you mentioned the county police and county park rangers involvement, has there been any discussion about conveying the land from the state to the county?
I think that everybody was asked at some point, a long time ago, nobody wanted it. Nobody
Oh,
wanted
they
it.
tried to give it to the state parks too.
Nobody wants it. No, sorry. just saying. But
At the public hearing, one of the neighbors asked for it to be conveyed to the village of Croton.
They don't want it. No, nobody wants it, because for obvious reasons. Okay.
I'm just gonna add, I was somewhat intimately involved in what was going on in this area, through Sandy Gallup's office. Myself and a coworker were, in communication with DEC staff as well as your neighbors back since 2020. I'm gonna say something totally different. Along the lines with Liz, I don't think this area should be reopened at all. I think if any money is spent, I think should be fencing and close it off permanently. The communication and the problems that were going on amongst your neighbors and the people that live there was incredibly intense. And I think that the people that live in this area, they should be actually thought of first, more than anyone that wants to come visit. I think that the people that live along this road were so incredibly upset about what was going on. I don't see a way. And I've gone actually to look at this area myself. I don't see a way where the residents of this area are going to be, I don't know, protected from the usage. So in my mind, I don't think it should be reopened at all. I think any money spent should be on fencing and permanently closing it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I think that the challenge is that forested land, and that it kind of gets to the point that Diane started with a little ago, which is, and I remember again from even when I was working in Sandy's office years ago, that they wouldn't even put regulations in that were different, right? And I mean, yeah, I think that when we were working together, Jen, you know, at that point, then it was clear they didn't want, it's their land, they took on the ownership of it, the state, and therefore they need to follow their access to public land, right, to forested lands, right? So this is considered forested lands, right? I think, pretty sure, right? It's not parks. It's not park land, right? It's, right. So, you know, again, I mean, if I think, you know, depending on what kind of case you can make from the many years of, I guess, say, abuse of the public land, which there certainly has been. There's also been plenty of years of good use, like probably more good use than abuse, but the abuse overtakes the use, the good use. You know, that there has certainly been abuse over the years, which has eroded the land, which has, you know, cause for concern, littering, all of the things that, you know, we've talked about, you know, people not, you know, not taking it with them. You know, all the things that we know that people should be doing and not finding space to use that. So I think that, you know, it's definitely a very careful balance, and I agree that unless there's a way to manage the area, it shouldn't be open. You know, we shouldn't build access to some place and then have no management. That should not.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the residents that live along this area should be first and foremost before anything else.
Well, one of the things that I have done living where I am and walking on the Aqueduct Trail every day is I have developed a list of the people that I know who live along the Aqueduct Trail. And I have sent the management plan to all of them and suggested that they provide their comments. So I'm trying to make sure that the neighbors are aware of the plan and aware of the various proposals. I don't think the DEC did a very good job of informing people about the public hearing and about the opportunity to provide comments. I asked them when I heard the management plan was being developed, I said, I will send you a list of stakeholders and ask that you inform them about it. And they didn't. So I found out about it inadvertently. Brian Healy sent me the plan, and then I contacted the DEC. I said, what about sending it to the stakeholders, the list that you promised me to send? And they said, okay, well, we'll send you the announcement, and if you would please send it out. So I agree that the input of the people who live in the area to provide input and comments. So I've done my best to contact the people that I know who live along the Aqueduct Trail and given them the information so they can put out comments.
And since you've been living there for so long and been so involved with neighbors and all of the access, what is your general feeling about the neighbors in terms of openness to having people access?
The ones that I know, who live along the trail are in favor, including the next door neighbor whose property is, partially, was involved in the social trail. He said, I don't want them trespassing on my property. It's a liability, but I am not against people having access to the unique area. I'm in favor of that. There are some people who I know who are very, very adamant that they don't want people to have access. I remember one of my neighbors, I was doing some work on the trail, and he came to me and said, Diane, how can we prevent those people from going down to the river? He's moving away. So, and my next door neighbor, who was the most upset, she moved away. And the new next door neighbor is in favor of having people having access. So it's really mixed. It's not universal. There are some people who really are very,
They want to share the resources.
they want to share the resources, and then there are other people who do not.
Right, and when we're
I'm also
talking-
in touch with the neighbors. There's a group of Croton River neighbors who live on the other side. And I'm in touch with them, and I've met with them and talked with them and sent the
Next group as
management
well.
plan to them so that they can have input also.
That's a mixed group of, do or don't. as
That's
well.
absolutely correct.
I think that, that it is a complicated issue, again, and I appreciate, everybody's perspective on this, and I think, we're gonna continue to hear the same perspective from the other municipalities, like you said. And so if we can, come up with a joint letter, I'm sure that will hit on all of the major points. So if we can pull together a meeting, that'd be great before the 22nd, and if not, maybe we can all just share comments in a round robin of, kind of notes of what people feel. But one of the things that you mentioned to me is that, in addition to people coming from outside wanting to use the area, neighbors like to use the area too. And one of the things we were talking about was this notion of permitting, and the way that the state seems to have been able to do it is bringing in a third party, similar to, I guess, what they do to reserve campsites, Reserve of America, or whatever that is issuing the permits. So they are charging, I think, $10 for a permit to get there for whatever, 6 people or however many it is, per permit. And
So like Jones Beach.
yeah, right, so the company gets, whatever, $750 and the state gets $250, but one of the things that Diane had mentioned is, well, people there who live there aren't gonna wanna pay that. But if you want the space managed and you wanna have access, then,
A trade-off.
It's a trade-off, right? Like, so that's what you would be potentially getting is the potential, again, to manage the number of people down there, to manage how people are getting down there, and to have some kind of oversight where you can control the things that are, what basically make people upset, which is noise, litter,
So we're asking for a park ranger.
well, I mean, I think
That
I think
ideally, that would be
makes
the
the
right
most sense,
thing.
and, but again, if you don't. have
Or sharing with
420
Croton.
people and 50 people, then, yeah. something. Exactly.
I have a very small technical question for you. In the report that I sent out, I showed pictures of these temporary closed signs that we had manufactured with permission from the DEC, but without any assistance from them. Would you like one of those for the moment put up by Gerlach Park? At the entrance to the stairway?
Yeah.
We may
I
have.
said yes already to that, yeah.
No, we haven't gotten an
No.
answer.
Yeah.
On the entrance to this, is that how they're accessing? They're going up the stairway and walking
Yeah.
across?
But there still is one on the pole
It's
Yeah.
facing the ball field. There's.
It's
a little.
It's just a little sign,
It's a little
but yeah,
sign.
you're saying one of these, this is the, sign. This, yeah. You have this one?
Do you want me to arrange to have one put up there
Sure,
for the moment?
I think so, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm big on informing people, so that.
Yeah, because you don't want them walking all the way there, because by the time they walk there, they're like, oh, I'm just going there anyway.
That's right. 100.
Telling them as they park the car
Alright.
is it better.
So I think we have a plan, we have some notes from some of the comments from town board, and we will potentially share those around. You're still working on court, seeing if Portland can put together a meeting, and if we can, we can, and if we can't, we'll.
I think
try
they
that.
will.
Okay,
They better commit.
okay.
And are we having a problem with parking? With too many people
We
parking
have
at,
not heard any complaints this year.
Not this year.
well, yeah, I think the word got out there, it was closed, but I think. One year we were having trouble with the parking next to the car, right?
2019.
So do we work on a management plan for that?
I mean,
Okay,
that it's a discussion. I mean, we have talked about it again over the years, but. We've come up with some solutions for when they have events there that we don't allow for to, like if the pavilion is rented. I think we've had no parking event or something like that. But because it's a public park, it's complicated. And. I mean, theoretically,
it's still using the park, so,
but that's been, I mean.
yeah, I mean, people park there for the after, anyway, so.
Exactly, that's the issue. Can't say you
You
can't
can't really,
park for this thing, but you can park for this. thing.
Yeah.
That's
That's a problem, yeah.
why we've had trouble over the years. Again, we've talked about this for many years.
You would just be pushing them over to, the housing development above the aqueduct. They, if you couldn't let park in Garrett Park, they're just gonna go park on the streets up there.
Which they do anyway.
Well, only for the unique areas, and now that hasn't been popular, everything's been closed. The few people that park in Garrett Park to walk on the aqueduct are maybe 2 cars or something like that.
All right, well, thank you very much. Again, we appreciate your input and your help and suggestions, and we will continue to work together on making sure that we do our best to advocate for everybody involved.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. All right. And we're going to now discuss the water source protection and planning update with our planner Valerie Master from Nelson Pope Voorhees. We're gonna just turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So I believe the board got a copy of the water source protection plan. This plan itself, and I'm just going to give you a little background on the plan, and then we can just talk a little bit about next steps. But the plan itself was one that the village of Ossining sought to get funding for from the New York State. There was a consortium of a task force, or they called it stakeholders, that were involved in the plan, and that included representatives from the village of Ossining, town of Portland, town of Newcastle, as well as the town of Ossining. The water source protection plan specifically focuses on water source protection and embraces an adaptive management approach. So there's 4 goals that came out of the watershed management plan. The first was to protect public health. The second was to address existing water quality issues. The third was to engage and educate the community about drinking water. And the fourth was to evaluate current land uses and plan for future land use. The priority issues that came out of those goals were really focused on more sampling of the source water before it gets to the plant to reduce the need for additional treatment. So, which means that there would be some additional testing of not only source water from the Indian Brook Reservoir, but also from the Croton Reservoir, because that's where you have a split between the water sources for drinking water for both village and town residents. There was also priority issues to continue coordination with the New York City DEP for operational water quality needs, especially dealing with the Croton Reservoir. Intermunicipal cooperation and enforcement of water quality issues was something of high priority. This really deals with, violations that get enforced, and it would be intermunicipally, because many of the land area, not only is it in the town of Austin, but also the town of Portland and the town of Newcastle. And a lot of those areas around the Indian Brook Reservoir are on septic systems. So it's just really trying to focus on some of those issues, as well as if there's any businesses or something like that that could have some sort of leakage in terms of pollutants. The other thing was to intermunicipal land use planning, specifically dealing with Indian Brook Gorge plan that the same communities are working on in terms of implementation. So it sort of acknowledged that other work is taking place, and it did not identify anything in particular that should be adopted. That is a separate project. Then the plan also focused on enhanced management of regulated contaminated sources, and this is really focused on developing a monitoring inspection program in coordination with New York State DEC, dealing with above and underground storage tanks. And then the last one was education outreach, and this is specifically geared towards homeowners dealing with septic system maintenance and pesticides and fertilizer applications. So that was really, in a nutshell, what the plan identified. And I think the next steps are for the stakeholders to more or less morph into some sort of task force at some point in time in the future, and then to work on implementation, potentially some programs, and then working towards basically implementing the priorities that were identified.
But that plan has been accepted by the village now.
So it's been accepted by the state, and it has, I don't know if it officially was adopted by the village versus just that it's completed plan is accepted by the state. And it doesn't require any municipality to adopt anything, and it didn't require anything of the town of Austining, right? So if there was anything that was going to require the town of Austining to adopt new regulations or new policies or new procedures, that would have been brought to your attention way ahead of time. These were just more recommendations, and actually very much macro recommendations. And now the implementation measures would be something more detailed oriented, and then potentially coming back to this board for additional discussion. If the village of Austining decides to move forward with the task force and try and implement the actual plan itself.
And did you want to talk a little bit about the other plan?
So the Indian Brook Gorge watershed plan, we're now in the phase of developing potential regulations to help protect the Indian Brook Reservoir and Croton Gorge in terms of land use. The project itself was put on a little bit of a hiatus while this water source protection plan was being implemented, but now that that's complete, we are looking to try to have some draft regulations regulations for the boards for your board to consider. And we're still waiting on what those will look like, but once I have them, I'll bring them back to this board.
What timeline on that?
Right now, that we were supposed to have a call this month, and that got canceled, so I don't know when the timeline is. Town of Portland's really spearheading this, so I'll reach out to them to find out when we anticipate having that follow-up. The other thing too is one thing that hasn't been finalized yet and has been discussed amongst the group or the committee working on the Indian Brook Croton Gorge plan is that, do we look to just try to develop something that all communities adopt? Or do we look to develop something that's very specific to each community dealing with those particular issues within the community? So that hasn't been finalized yet. And I think some of it will come, that will kind of settle itself out once we have some ideas, the concepts and the regulations that are potentially.
Okay, I mean, I've been having some conversations with Cortland over the last since June. And the first conversation, I'm asking that we would be working on this, and that, water sources are invaluable and irreplaceable. And they thought I was only talking about one specific project that I was not in favor of, because they hadn't really looked at it. And I said, no, I'm in favor of having a secret done on all projects and anything in the watershed. I mean, it's water for 44,000 people.
Right.
And since then, they've hired an engineer, and last I heard, they have a moratorium on all building in the area while they're taking a look at it. So I really appreciate how proactive Cortland's being and how they're working with us. And, you know, I really like that. And I hope the other communities will be as forthcoming about, you know, understanding how important this is. And that we can get something really concrete done shortly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're one of those communities and we're gonna be putting in concrete legislation, zoning, the zoning subcommittee is already working on looking at the watershed and making sure that, you know, we put our money, you know, do the same work that everybody else does and look at our
Absolutely. Well, I mean,
our watershed, you know, of the Indian Brook watershed and put the same kind of.
right. I mean, I would say that this, well, first of all, Valerie, when she was working for the village years ago, worked on the initial.
When I worked for Westchester County.
Um,
The jobs, I started from Brian.
Started it. I will also say Daria is still here, has also been involved in this, for many, many years. And I think you can vouch for the fact that, you know, that we showed up for all the meetings. right? For many years. Correct, yeah, and, you know, we were always, you know, Austin was always, town of Austin was always there. And, you know, we understand how important our water source protection is. And, we're gonna do everything we can to protect it. I do wanna just make it very clear though that, the Indian Brook Reservoir itself is owned by the village of Austin. So just
In the town.
but it's in the town, but it's owned by the village. It isn't our town of Austin, unincorporated town of Austin water. It is water that's in the town, but owned by the village.
Which serves a lot of our residents though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Serves, yeah,
So it's village owned, but does serve our residents. water.
absolutely.
So it still gives our residents water.
100%.
Yeah, I mean. It's probably 3/4 of the town of Austen's water, you know, the other people are on wells up there.
Yeah,
But-
absolutely.
There is one small thing that I would just urge you all, but right now, it's, there's a bill that's sitting on Governor Hochul's desk to be signed. That would give better, most of the streams are called Class C streams. So you don't just worry about what's immediately around your reservoir, you worry about all the land that's draining into that reservoir, and some of those streams are intermittent, some of them are full-time. So Class C streams don't have very good protection at all, really, period. But this bill would give them the same protection as if they were, you know, a much higher level of protection. And it's sitting on her desk to be signed. And that's all. If you feel like it, okay, you email, give her an email, please sign that legislation.
Right.
I'm glad you guys, I mean, because I haven't been part of these meetings with the different committees. I was glad to hear the summary today. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Valerie? All right, well, very much appreciate it. And with that, I think that's to for a motion to adjourn to the executive session for advice council personnel and contracts. Much. And thanks for joining us. And again, remember, give local, shop local. Except when necessary. And we'll be back next week for a legislative session on December 13th. That's Tuesday. See you then.